Okay, so thank you for accepting my invitation. And first, could you please introduce your startup, Numi, to our audience?
Yeah, sure. My name is Harrison Telyan. I am the co-founder of Numi, and we are your startup's design department. So we are a design as a service subscription model that pairs you with world-class designers that focus on anything from marketing design, sales motion, banners, ads, all the way to product design, thought leadership, information architecture, animation, motion, things like that. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Um, could you tell us more about how you found your idea and how you validated it? I mean, how did you find first users? Did you organize custom interview? Did you reach out to your network? What happened?
Yeah, and so just for some context, like, um, you know, both of us, my co-founder and I, we just both come from a design background. He is technical, whereas I was like classically trained in industrial design. I'm a Y Combinator alum. I'm also a RISD alum, Rhode Island School of Design, and I have about like 10 years experience doing that across many different industries. So lots of failures, and but with failures lessons. And most notably, I was the founding product designer at Imager, where we scaled to about 400 people in like a year or so, and then got to 330 million monthly active users. And so that was my first job out of school. And what I noticed was how chaotic the design process was. Even as a designer, I thought that was like chaotic. And so there's always been this notion within me um, to try to put it on rails, right? Like, how cool would it be if you could take like a chaotic system and then put it on rails, but not lose any of the value that that chaos brings? And that's always been fascinating to me. And it's also been fascinating for like my co-founder as well, Agree. And so we've shared that love even before we met each other. And so after Imager, I went on to this mortgage tech company called Syndio, and they were trying to revolutionize the way that mortgages um, actually just the entire mortgage industry, how you buy a home, how you learn about it, the risk, the potential. And
Mm.
they kind of folded. Unfortunately, there's like an interaction of elements that like, uh, kind of kind of like brought them to their knees. But after that, went on to a similar company called Clara, and they were tackling more or less like the same issue, but in a slightly different way. They were focused more on like the internal side of things. And so that's where I met my co-founder, Agri Ahmed. And so like we sat right across the table from one another. It was love at first sight. But he was on the technical side. I was on the design side, and that really allowed us to build it sounds like so corporatey, but like synergy. We had like not only were we becoming friends, but we also understood one another's ability to understand the importance of urgency, shipping, thinking through things together. And yeah, like every lunch it seemed or when we would go out for walks, just talk about the products, like our conversations just like were ever expansive. So one day we just got it in our heads that you know Africa was like this almost like final frontier, where you could um, basically build anything. There was no
Yeah,
legacy products or anything like that, and he had really inspired me um, to learn a little bit more about the continent, specifically Kenya and Nairobi, because he had spent an internship there back in the day in college, and he described um, this notion around like you know setting up software so that, small businesses could run a little bit more effectively. When we got there, it was a little bit different. And so we spent, press fast forward, we spent about maybe the first like 2 years pivoting from making software for like the medicine industry, like wholesale medicine industry. We then like that didn't really like take off, so then we pivoted to another company idea where it was like uh, B2B wholesale for restaurants. And then we noticed through that pivot, now we're on year 3, we noticed through that pivot that these restaurant owners were not only just buying like flour and like, tons of kilos of sugar and stuff like that, but they were also buying things like tampons, things like butter, like
Yeah.
smaller personal objects. And so we were like, oh, okay, interesting. So this is almost becoming like a one-stop shop, very similar to like Instacart. And so press fast forward again, we're in our 4th year, after many different pivots. And I'm really compressing this, but after all that time, we found ourselves in a position where we were becoming the Instacart of Africa. And so at its peak, we had displaced Jumia. It's a publicly listed company. It's more or less like the Amazon of the continent. And we became 5 times bigger than they did at their grocery delivery game. Obviously the unit economics did not work out. So, when COVID hit, or when it was just starting to hit, there was murmurs, all across Africa, but especially in like the hot places like Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, about, whoa, well, is this going to be another outbreak? Well, that continent is not,
Yeah.
is there are no strangers to outbreaks. Like it just runs rampant across the continent. So they were really early to adopt masks and certain precautions. And, with all that, what we saw was boda drivers, the people that are like couriers, that's what they call them, bodas, their prices began to rise. Well, why? Because everyone wanted to get online to prepare for this incoming wave of corona. So those unit economics did not work out very long. We like scaled really fast before thinking about monetizing or profitability. But we closed down shop. It was like, it was really like a tremendous experience. And we learned a lot. And I feel like we would be totally different people without that experience. But sprinkled in between there, we had gotten into Y Combinator, and it just seemed like it was the right move to take a pause after that, and really like introspect. And what ended up happening was my dad had passed away during that time from cancer. And so, um, it really derailed a lot of the things that we were thinking about as a next move. But, you know, through that, a handful of our founder friends had reached out asking for maybe some design work, engineering work. And so we started, leaning on people that we would contract out to satisfy those engineering and design needs. And suddenly, this like side company that had loosely started in Africa, kind of gotten us through Corona, was making money. And so we were like, whoa, like, go figure. When you lean into your core competencies, you can monetize something. And so press fast forward again, we're about, you know, uh, almost 2 years into it at this point with, our company, but we've dropped engineering so that we can devote all of our focus to the design discipline, just because it can go so deep and we just want to have one North Star. But yeah, that's kind of like the medium short version. But that's how we arrived at where we are today.
That's basically a tremendous pivot story, and
Yeah.
you just
Lots and lots and lots of pivots. Lots of pivots.
so at this point, can we say that your startup is operating in the product-based service business model area, some sorts?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
And at this point, can we say that your startup is operating in the product-based service business model?
The product as a service business model? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
productized service.
Oh, productized service. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, like basically we're a marketplace at this point, but we run things just a little bit differently than our competitors. What's interesting is a lot of our competitors, they don't start off from a design background. They start off with a marketing background, and oftentimes, you know, the companies startups will go to some of these competitors of ours wanting product design, but they'll just get a flashy new website that can't translate into the product, and it just ends up as bullshit, right? Or like vaporware, and then they're stuck maybe like tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases, holding the bag of this like shitty brand identity that's actually not a design system, that's not scalable, that doesn't actually capture anything about the ethos of the company. And um, we wanted to kind of take this different approach where um, it's a company started by designers for designers. So we focus religiously on just making the designer the happiest person alive. Because if our designers are happy, that means that our customers and users are happy. If our customers and users are happy, then Numi's customers are happy. And if Numi's customers are happy, Numi's happy. And so it just creates this flywheel of support and happiness, which in turn creates great products.
Right. Can I ask you to elaborate more in detail about the financial part of the company? I mean, how does it financially make sense? How do you manage to offer a better price than let's say agencies or in-house designers do with the without the hassle of hiring freelancers?
Yeah, I mean, we so just to be clear, we do have freelancers. That's what makes up our
Oh, okay.
marketplace. But I think what separates us from the rest is there's some secret sauce in there that I'm not, able to share. But
Yeah, sure.
I will say this, being a designer myself definitely affords us a certain type of unfair advantage in terms of assessing talent, and uh, what you might price that talent at. But you talk to any of our designers, we never ever tell a designer um, to reduce their cost or suggest a price or something. They view us, our guild views us as design advocates first, so we're always on their side from the jump. And so we have naturally like tons and tons of data points to suggest, based off of your skill level, your proficiency in certain tools, your discipline around like what type of price would keep you competitive, and what type of price might really resonate given a certain package or a certain skill set. And so I think that's probably like as much as I'll speak to it on, because like our competitors, they take a different tactic where they will hire full time, or they will just pressurize these designers to like lower their prices, and it puts them in a position where they feel commoditized. And I don't know about you, but like whenever you're doing your SEO work and a client's pressuring you, like, do you feel very inspired to give your best work? Probably not. So again, it just kind of goes back to this like guiding light of how can we make the designers the happiest people on the planet, and we very much subscribe to that ethos of like how Airbnb puts its host up on a pedestal.
Yeah,
um, we very much subscribe to putting our designers up on a pedestal.
yeah. When they have human labor. involved, you should always prioritize
Yeah,
that. It happens. Yeah.
always. Yeah, always, always.
How scalable is your financial model? I mean, do you think you can scale indefinitely, or is it there a point at which you just
Yeah, I think like, the sky's the limit, right? And sky goes on for a while. Um, yeah, I think like probably like the biggest roadblocks that we might encounter, um, they might they might be TAM related. How big is the TAM
yeah,
for startups that need design work? I think like on the surface, it's really easy to dismiss it as small or maybe even medium, depending on the day. But I actually think it's quite large. When you come from a design background, like my co-founder and I do, uh, the depth is incredibly deep. Like there's so much depth into the design world. Like there's everything from like product design, user research, film, video, motion, animation, illustration, lighting, sound, voice, AR, VR, like the graphic, like there are so many disciplines. And now what we're seeing, which we love, but we're also not like paying too much mind to it, is our competitors are trying to branch out into other disciplines like engineering or HR or writing
yeah,
or more marketing focused. And have at it. Like we're going to continue on in design and get really, really deep into this discipline. And maybe they just don't know how deep it goes, or maybe they do and it's uninteresting. But to us, it's very interesting because it's our bread and butter. It's what we love to do. So yeah, we're very grateful for our designers to be like on this adventure with us.
yeah. I've seen that lots of your competitors just try to bundle up different services and offer them all together.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the reason I ask you about scalability is there's lots of businesses that are being productized, even SEO services, copywriting
yeah.
services, design services. Do you think that in this market, this business model in general, it's possible to see a consolidation or where a few big players dominate the whole market in the future? I mean, is there any advantage to scale in this business model?
So so is your question, could you rephrase the question?
Yeah, of course. Do you think there'll be a point where several big players will dominate, let's say, the whole product design niche?
Yeah, I think for any industry, like for let's say tech, it's it's basically Apple, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, right? For oil, it's like Exxon, BP, Shell. For
Right.
like any industry is going to have like major dominant players. They didn't get to where they are though without a certain type of allegiance to a belief, and so it's hard for me to speculate around like what the other players in our design space are doing, but I can tell you this: it certainly helps coming from a design background. And I do know that we are quite anomalous as founders that are also designers. Typically, I find that designers don't really go into a business track or are business minded. Now, that typical nature, hopefully, what I'm seeing is now changing, where you're seeing a lot more like solopreneurs. Um,
Yeah.
you're seeing a lot more companies that are design led, like Pinterest, or most notably like Airbnb. But I wish that there was more. Like, and I always tell our designers as well, like, wouldn't it be wonderful if like maybe one day we got into competition together? Like the only person that's going to benefit is like us, because it forces us to like innovate on behalf of the customer. And I love thinking about that. I also like we constantly um we're constantly getting like the comparison of, oh well, it's much like SNL, right? All these famous comedians went through SNL, like Adam Sandler or Eddie Murphy or like Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, and now they're all really successful, in their own career. And so if we could be that alone would make us happy. We're already really happy. So if we just keep on doing what we're doing, it's just not going to stop. We have no intentions of stopping.
Yeah. Actually, the coolest thing about solopreneurs is the fact that they're trying to leverage AI and to launch one-person companies. So therefore, they
Yeah,
just outsource their design, their SEO, their copywriting to other product and services. That opens new
yeah,
markets, maybe. It seems to
yeah.
be a
Sam
trend.
Altman. Sam Altman. I forgot where he was talking, but he was saying that he and a handful of his tech founder friends are in this group chat basically placing wagers on when the next $1 billion single person company is going to happen. And at its root, it's made possible by AI. Now, internally, there's a bunch of conversations that we're having with our designers, with ourselves on how is AI going to be blended in to the design process? The top question is like, are designers going to get replaced? And I really don't think that that's going to happen for a while. I think there's like a lot of like context building and inputs and
Yeah.
there's just like so many like human things that need to happen in order for something as a designer getting replaced by a computer script. But talk to me in like 5-7 years when AGI breaches the surface. That will be interesting to see. But even then, Sam Altman said something really interesting as well, which is people don't really care what tech can do. People care what other people can do, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's going to be true for a very long time. I think that's just biologically baked into the human experience.
Yeah. At least that might be true with designers, less with the
Yeah.
SEOs and the because we mainly rely on this structuring unstructured data, and that's pretty much replaceable.
Hmm. I mean, how are you
How,
seeing it
how
in the SEO world?
well at this point, AI content writers just suck,
Yeah.
but that's because people try to they don't really fine tune the models. And if you're trying to fine tune a model, it's better to how do you define what the good writing is? I mean, of course, AI can optimize for keywords, for structured data, for metadata, for all sorts of technical parameters. But how do you define great writing? That doesn't feel like it's written by a robot. So
Yeah.
the main definition would be you tend to avoid certain words. You don't
Hmm.
try to add, you actually subtract. And if you modify, if you fine tune the model and try to subtract several filler words, robotic words, or even try to vary the length of the sentences, there's a whole different output. Many people don't realize this. Also, yeah, basically that's the whole secret. But at this point, AI is pretty much able to do all the technical tasks related to keyword optimization, link building, and so on and so forth. You cannot
Interesting.
just write great content. Yeah,
That's
and
interesting to know. I don't know too much about that world, so it's always interesting to talk to an expert.
well, it's basically text. So there's not much creativity going on. You always have patterns, and
Hmm.
also the LLMs themselves, they're trained to seem to be non-deterministic, but at their
Yeah.
core they are deterministic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with agents. We're specializing each agent for a specific task and
Hmm.
training it on materials. And
Hmm.
also another problem with the only problem with AI content is the more AI tools appear on the market, the more AI content is on the web. So at some point, AI tools themselves train on the content that they generated. Because at some point, the
Yeah.
speed of
Funny.
generating content is so that at some point,
Yes, this
most of the
echo
content will be
chamber.
AI generated. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's doubling. It's like learning from poor quality that it maybe two
Yes.
years ago put out. I guess like that's why, you have the New York Times suing OpenAI right now because, you know, they train like OpenAI's original model was trained on all this really, really sophisticated data, like New York Times, maybe Wall Street Journal, The Economist, all that jazz. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the quality bar is maintained because it's already pretty low. And it will also be interesting to see how companies like Jasper, right? They
Yeah.
how do they maintain their relevance and significance in a world that, you know, basically it's like if you get good at prompting, you can get away with not paying for Jasper, but just GPT-4, for $20 a month or something, right? So and another thing on this, and then we can like move on, obviously, but like it's interesting to talk about where I'm not sure unless OpenAI is like cooking up something that we don't know about. I'm not sure that, companies like Jasper are going to, lose their footing for a while because a lot of what makes them great is they know their ICP, they know that ideal customer, right? And so they have worked years refining these like models and taking out those keywords or making it shorter or finding that right tone, like you were saying, versus someone like myself just trying to like write up a prompt, not being an expert
Yeah.
in that field at all. They do a lot of like fast forwarding for me.
The actual problem at this point is not actually the AI tools and the quality they generate, but the fact that AI generally is unreliable in generating content. So
Mm,
sometimes you might get a good response to your prompt, other times it gets it generates a lot of rubbish. So there's this
yeah,
input output
totally.
reliability problem,
Yeah,
and at this point, people are still selling AI as a tool to enhance human productivity.
yeah,
So instead
totally.
of making you 20% more productive, you just basically made 70% or 100% more productive. But still,
Yeah,
there's humans in the loop.
yeah,
But
totally.
AI allows you to sell workforce, not human labor, enhanced by AI. That's
Yeah,
another thing many people miss, and I think that
yeah,
will eventually happen in
that's a
the
good
future.
point. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah, so just a thought about what might happen in the future.
Yeah,
Now let's get back to our
sure.
discussion.
Yeah.
How important do you think design is to early stage companies, early stage startups, not companies? Let's say pre-seed.
Yeah. I think design as an output is less important than um, design thinking and user research, right? Like these are the core tenets of the discipline. I talk to like maybe like 8 to 10 founders a day, and the common string that I see between all of them is they're asking like, how should I be thinking about design, right? Like, how can I leverage design um, for profitability, for growth, for finding PMF? And I always tell them more or less the same thing, which is like, go do it yourself, go and hop into Figma yourself, and start making prototypes that you can go talk to your customers with, right? Even before that, though, you should be trying your very hardest to talk to like 10 customers a week. And that will continue until the company closes or you retire, right? Obviously, it's smaller for like B2B companies, or like enterprise, but you really ought to not start sentences off with, I think, when you're designing a company or a product or a service. You really want to get in the habit of starting off sentences with it should be because, and then you're pointing to evidence, such as like your mixed panel data or analytics, industry insight, customer interview, or testimonial. The less that you can start sentences off with, I think, and switch it over to it should be because, and then pointing to evidence, the more objective you're going to be, and the less uh, subjective you're going to be, right? We also see this with like early designers as well. If they're starting off a sentence with I think, they're typically maybe more on the art side. They're like, that's not really design. Um, Design is objective. It's made for someone else. It's not for you. And you have to constantly be sourcing the root of where that solution came from in the first place. So it's incredibly important in these early stages. I think, though, that founders really genuinely struggle with knowing how design can be leveraged in those early days, because I think they reduce the discipline down to, unintentionally, right? Like no fault of their own. But they just reduce it down to, I need a logo, I need a brand identity, I need to make some wires, and I need to learn Figma. Sure, that's maybe like, that's the implementation side. But I always say this as well, like Figma, these design tools, they're just an implementation detail. Like if you find yourself wanting to hop into Figma right off the bat, bruh, like you are not doing it right. You need to go talk to your users first. And the only time you should be hopping into Figma or, doing some of that other stuff is after you've spoken to your users and you know that you're done with a cohort of research, after you can start anticipating what those users are going to say. And the way that you run it is, I tell this all the time as well. The way that you run it is go talk to your users and give them a prompt. And maybe it's like, hey, I want you to sign up, right? Using this prototype or this like, and you should always prototype before you build, because engineers, they're really, really expensive. And yeah, why not use Figma prototyping? So you give them a prompt, hey, go sign up. And then they might turn to you and they might say like, how do I do that? Well, you turn to them and you say, how might you do that? Right. And they're going to go through that flow. During that flow, you're going to watch them put their hand on their head out of frustration, or you might see some retinal vibration, which indicates like confusion. You might see like some cursor shake. You might see them sighing or something like that. Those are great places to jot down and come up with problems that they're experiencing. From those problems, you come up with how might we solve this frustration at this point of the sign up process. And when you look at the how might we's and the solutions, you then prioritize them. If those don't have a one-to-one mapping of your feature product roadmap, you're fucked. That's actually, you don't know your user, and your product roadmap is wrong, because that means that you're starting off sentences with I think versus it should be because, and pointing to the customer interviews that you just had. And it's like, well, how do you get really, really rich data outside of observing? You ask good questions at the end, right? Like if you had a magic wand, what would you change about that experience? Was there anything in there that you were expecting to see that you didn't? Or simply like, what was frustrating about that experience? What would you do differently? These open-ended questions, and, giving them the reassurance that critical feedback is welcome with open arms. Like this is what separates $1 million companies from $1 billion companies. They're constantly at it, constantly asking the user questions, constantly observing their behaviors. And so that's where design starts for startups, is talking to users and making sure that they can understand them so well that they're anticipating what they're going to say before they even say it.
Right. To be honest with you, before this interview, I was guilty of the same thinking about design. Basically, either some logos, a landing page that optimized for conversion. That's it.
Sure. And
this perspective.
most startups don't actually even need a website to begin with. They don't need a logo, they don't need a brand identity. And I always remind them of the fact that Craigslist built like a $10 billion company off the backs of blue URL links. If you were to go to Craigslist right now, it's still as fucking ugly as it was 10 years ago, right? But guess what? What happens when you apply design to it? You get a company like Airbnb that's doing the
Yeah.
same thing, but they are very prescriptive with that user experience because they understand exactly where it's coming from. It's coming from a place of knowledge. It's coming from a place of Joe Gebbia and Brian Chesky staying and running Airbnbs themselves routinely. And obviously that culture trickles down to your entire product team, your eng team, your marketing team, legal, whatever. So now you have a culture of design thinking, and it's ubiquitous across the entire company. When you have something like that, I mean, shit, like that is potent. That is like seriously potent. And like I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. And like biology does not lie because it is exciting. It is exciting not only for them because I use their products, but it's also exciting for Numi because that's the culture that we're trying to create as well. Oh, and
And
actually
that's why
one
I
more
never use
thing.
Booking.
Yeah, funny. Another thing is like you like design has a fun side. Design's fun side is like the soft underbelly of design is marketing design, sales motion, brand identity, logo, all that fun stuff. But most founders don't earn the right to work on that stuff. Most founders are really, really eager to hop right into that even before they've validated an idea or asked a user, how much would you pay for this if this prototype was real, right? You want to put yourself in a position when you're a founder of earning the right to do fun things. So we didn't, like Numi, for example, we did not earn the right to think about our brand identity until we made our first dollar. Okay.
Yeah.
And, a lot of founders today have kind of been spoiled by the move fast, break things era of Facebook, where funding was free and it was a zero interest rate environment. And, growth at all costs was the name of the game. Now I think we're kind of being brought down to earth again. And it's like, hey, have high growth or have no growth at all, you may want to figure that out. And you may want to start monetizing as soon as possible so that if you do go out to fundraise again, you're coming from a position of power. You're not
Yeah.
standing on one leg, right? Investors more or less are just, as my co-founder agrees says, they're just, loan sharks in khakis. So, they're just looking for a payday. But you're looking at your company as your child. They're two very different outlooks. So if you can walk into those chats with, monetization under your belt, maybe even just like 1/5 of your customers as an experiment, you've already put yourself at a league above others. And you get there by understanding your customer, talking to them, observing how might we's, and knowing what is valuable to them so you can charge.
Yeah. So financial sustainability is in vogue again, right?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Do you think that, let's say at some point in the future, AI is able to automate or maybe replace some of the workflows that perform the human designers currently? Do you think companies like yours that rely on high quality human labor could adapt somehow or change the business model
Yeah,
and
I mean,
survive
we've already deployed. We use AI at Numi all the time, right? Like we're constantly. I mean, right now we have a couple projects that are being integrated into our workflows to automate some stuff to bring. It all just goes back to pointing to the designer. If we can build
yeah,
tools for the designer, and we can also integrate AI into our workflows or our back office ops to free us up, like that's the win. That's the W, right? Like we're not really focused on creating vaporware or some of these like, GPT or OpenAI wrappers, we're also not like rushing, because we want to be really, really thoughtful of like, hey, we don't want to just like interact with AI just for the sake of us being a tech company and interacting with the latest technology. We want to actually be thoughtful about what we're creating. We want to really be considerate to the time that we spend on something versus the value that it delivers. So we have a few things that maybe our competitors won't be too happy about giving away for like a low cost or basically for free soon. But yeah, we use AI quite a bit.
Right. But those are commercial, your commercial secrets, right?
For now. Yeah.
Okay, Harrison. So thank you for your time and your willingness to talk about your experience and about what you think about design in general and the future.
Yeah, likewise.
And it
I
was very
really
insightful
appreciate
discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
likewise. Thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.